Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Hjörtur Smárason. He's going to be speaking on adapting to a changing world, climate sustainability, and destination management. And there he is with us. Let me invite you, sir, Mr. Hjörtur Smárason.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this presentation. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me here. This is my first time in India. Before I go any further, is this the clicker?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm going to start by reading something for you. People were dying faster than ever. There was no coolness to be had. All the children were dead. All the old people were dead. People murmured what should have been screams of grief. Those who could still move shoved bodies out of the lake or out toward the middle where they floated like logs or sank. The night passed. Only the very brightest stars were visible, blurs swimming ahead. A moonless night, satellites passing overhead, east to west, west to east, even once north to south. People were watching. They knew what was happening. They knew, but they didn't act, couldn't act, didn't act. Nothing to do, nothing to say. Many years passed Frank that night. Possibly he would drown here. The thought caused him to exert himself. He dug his elbows in, raised himself up. His limbs were like cooked spaghetti draping his bones, but his bones moved of their own accord. He sat up. The air was still hotter than the water. He watched sunlight strike the tops of the trees on the other side of the lake. It looked like they were bursting into flame. Balancing his head carefully on his spine, he surveyed the scene. Everyone was dead. Sorry to start with something so dark straight after lunch. This is a dystopian scenario from a book called The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. It describes a heat wave, a horrible event in India in the near future. 20 million people die in that heat wave. Science fiction, thankfully, and let's hope we manage to keep it that way. Even though this may sound very dystopian and dark, this is actually a book of hope. Because this event sparks a series of other events. It's the kick that the world needs to act. And India takes the lead in doing something about climate change in the book. So, you might want to check it out. So my name is Hjörtur Smárason. I don't need to do any more introduction. I think you got fine enough introduction before, so I won't say anything. But I was the CEO of Visit Greenland, and I lived in Nuuk, the capital of Greenland. And Greenland, I mean, we have this goal that the world needs to stay preferably at 1.5 degrees increase of temperatures. Because worst case scenario, we reach 3 degrees. Now, Greenland has already surpassed 3 degrees in temperature rise, with consequences that mean the ice is melting, the glacier is melting, the sea ice is disappearing. And that may sound like a good thing, but the sea ice is like the highway for the people. There are no roads in Greenland, so when you need to move from one village to the next, the frozen sea is the best way to do so. And when it's not frozen or not frozen enough, you can't travel. In the last 40 years, from 1979 to 2022, we can see how the sea ice on the North Pole has diminished. It has retreated. If we look at the map, you can see that in 79, the sea ice reached all the way down here. Now it's up here. The difference is 900 kilometers. It's about the same as if in 1979 the sea ice was in Delhi, but now it had retreated and melted up north and it would be further north than the Himalayas, than Tibet. It would be somewhere in Xinjiang in West China. And we know this is often referred to as the third pole, that it's melting as well and it's having its consequences. And that's something we need to worry about. These are events that are happening all over the world. I was in Morocco last week. That was before I went to Copenhagen and Dublin and all that. And on Wednesday, we were on the beach, and the temperature was 32 degrees. At this time of the year, it's usually 10 to 15 degrees. 32 degrees, which was nice at the moment, but putting it into context, it wasn't that nice. Also, a couple of days ago, the most extreme temperature difference in one country in the same day was recorded. I don't know if you saw the news of that. Do you know how big the difference was? Raise your hand. 50.3 degrees. 70.3 degrees. That's huge. 70 degrees difference. Or 90.3 degrees. There are no hands anywhere. You all think it was more? Less? 90.3 degrees. Difference in one country in the same day. That was Tuesday, I believe. In China. So, in Xinjiang, in West China, the temperature went down to minus 52.3 degrees. Extreme cold wave hitting them. Well, at the same time, something that also hit India, the temperatures went up to 38 degrees in Badu, in southern China. So temperature difference of 90.3 degrees. So we are facing a challenge, we are seeing the consequences, and we are forced to adapt. In Greenland, as I mentioned, when the sea ice is disappearing, you cannot travel on the ice, you cannot hunt either. Many of the people living in the villages in Greenland are still hunters, and they live from catching sea mammals, and they do that where you can go and on the ice, you make holes in the ice, and that's where you catch them. So their way of living is being threatened. You see the sled dogs, and they used to be 35,000 in 1990. Now there are only 15,000 left. A culture and an animal that's going to disappear if nothing happens. So what can be done? What can be changed? How can we adapt? Tourism was one of the things we were looking at. How can we use tourism to help the communities to find a new way of making a living? It makes most sense that we focus on sustainable tourism, which is what we did. We asked ourselves some important questions. First of all, okay, why? Question number one, why? Why do we want tourism? Well, economic development, that's usually the answer. We want to create jobs, we want to create, bring in more money, and we need to ask ourselves also, well, that's good, but jobs for whom? Money for whom? Who is going to benefit from this? We need to make sure that those who benefit are the local people. Those who benefit are the local communities. Because otherwise, we are just exploiting communities that are already pressed. We need to make sure that we don't do that. Now, very often, people focus on tourism development, they're focusing on the numbers. How many people are coming? How many people came last year? How many people can we get next year? And this is because this is so easy to measure. But it's the wrong measurement. We shouldn't be counting heads. Because we could get 2 million extra tourists, but if they only stay for the day and they don't leave any money, or if they spend all their money with international companies and they go back to the US or the UK, what's the good of that? So part of our strategy was not to get too many tourists. So at the same time as we were marketing Greenland as a sustainable destination, we were thinking, okay, how can we also build our marketing in such a way that we keep certain people out? Because we don't want them. Not because we don't like them, but we just don't think they're the right fit for what we have to offer. This goes both in terms of where they spend the money, but Greenland is also a very challenging destination. It is cold, it is difficult. You're going to get delays on flights that might even last days. So it is quite extreme and rough. And that is a fantastic adventure if you love that. I love that, that's why I lived there. But not all people like that. Many people want to see that, but travel in luxury. And that's maybe more of a challenge. So, what do we do and how do we do it? We create a video to get everyone together.
Dad, my father, he taught me to hunt, to read the landscape, to understand the nature, to talk to the dogs, to adapt to the extreme climate. But things are changing. The animals are migrating. The glacier is melting. The ice is not secure anymore. Times are changing, and yet again, we need to start a journey into the unknown. A journey of adaptation. Adaptation not to an extreme climate, but to extreme changes to the climate and to extreme changes in technology. We are on a journey into the unknown when it comes to the Arctic climate. A journey where a certain skill set is needed. Just like the generations before me led the journeys that helped us across the Arctic, reach the North Pole, and understand the role of the Arctic in the global ecosystem. Greenland is now again leading the journey of understanding. A journey back in time through thousands of frozen years. A journey into the future where the effects of climate change can already be seen. After all, we are the ones with the expertise in Arctic weather and Arctic conditions, and the expertise in traveling in the Arctic. You see, we are embarking on another journey. A journey into the future of tourism where we want to become a leading destination in sustainable tourism. A destination where we see tourism as a powerful tool for economic development in the rural areas of Greenland. Tourism that benefits both the visitor and the host. Tourism that creates an economic foundation for the continued practices of traditional handcraft and knowledge, and relevance of the same into the future. Tourism that has adapted to the environment and local communities. And we have reserved a seat for our special companions on this journey, a seat for you. Join us.
So while the Greenlanders are experts in adapting to extreme climates, they have a new challenge to adapt to. And it's a shared challenge that we all have. So the big question is, how are we adapting? How are you adapting? So we know the climate is changing. We've seen that. We've felt that. It used to be just in the Arctic that you felt that 25, 30 years ago. I thought it was ridiculous when people were saying, no, there is no climate change, and what are you talking about? It's nonsense. Especially in North America. And I was like, I'm watching the glaciers disappear in front of my eyes. Come to the Arctic and see it for yourself. Now everyone is feeling it no matter where in the world you are. But it's not just the climate that's changing, it's also behavior. Because people are more aware now. They choose differently. The young people, the young generation, they think differently. They have other values, and they therefore make other choices. And in most cases, better choices than the older generations. So that's to be applauded. But it also means that we need to adapt our businesses. How do we accommodate that? How do we meet them? How do we create new products? And it's our role now to do so. This is a picture from an event in Iceland where the first glacier was declared dead, declared disappeared. So it's like a funeral in a way, marking that event. And an Icelandic writer, Andrés Magnason, he wrote this plaque that's on the rock here. He wrote a letter to the future. It's very short. It's shorter than what I read earlier, so I'll read it. Ok, which is the name of the glacier, is the first Icelandic glacier to lose its status as a glacier. In the next 200 years, all our glaciers are expected to follow the same path. This monument is to acknowledge that we know what is happening and what needs to be done. Only you know if we did it. Because we all know what needs to be done, and our children will judge us based on if we did anything or not. Now, if we do not change and adapt, we might be forced to do so. This is a picture from an airport in the Netherlands, Schiphol, where activists were stopping private jets, blocking the airport. We are seeing a lot of this in Europe, but we're also starting to see it elsewhere. Even in Japan, we are seeing protests, climate protests. So maybe we should be ahead of that wave so we won't be forced to do something in a way that doesn't make sense. And there is a lot of options. In Greenland, there's a local air carrier, Air Greenland, and as I mentioned before, there are no roads, and it's a very big island. It's 2.1 million square kilometers. That's like 2/3 of India, and there are only 56,000 people living there. 56,000, that's a tiny fraction. That's like 2 streets in Delhi or something like that, spread over all that region. And the only way to travel is by boat in the summertime, by dog sled or snowmobile in the winter if the sea is frozen, or you fly. And as a tourist, you have to fly. Which is, of course, a bit of an oxymoron when we think about sustainability and sustainable tourism. But Air Greenland, they are making an effort. So they are flying 5% SAF, which is sustainable aviation fuel, which is one of the solutions that's now available. So there are things that we can do. If we look at prognosis, this is what the IATA sees for the future of travel and sees it as aviation travel primarily, doubling until the year 2040. But will it happen that way? Because if behavior is changing, we might be seeing some new trends changing that. This is actually the development of electric vehicles in Norway. If we look at 2007-8, they didn't even exist. But with the right efforts and initiatives in Norway, that has changed drastically. So at the beginning of last year, the part of electric vehicles of new registered cars in Norway was 84%. So things can change fast. And we need to think about it when we're thinking about change. How do we create that change, and what is our role? Now, you work with sustainable tourism, and that's why you're here. And we all play a role. So as a tourism company, what is our responsibility and what can we do? How much control do we have over our own supply chain? And how can we influence that? How much responsibility do we leave to the government? How much responsibility do we leave to the end customer? So these are the things we need to think about. These are the things that we need to ask ourselves. What is it that we do to encourage that change, to create that movement? Because you are the leaders, you are the change makers. You are the ones who create the future. And while it can be quite depressing to look at what's happening with climate change and the events there, it can be equally inspiring to look at the initiatives that are happening, both in technology that we're seeing, but also the things that you are doing here, the things that many other companies are doing around the world, those who are really leading the change. And if we allow ourselves to think out of the box, we can come up with fantastic solutions. That's one of the fantastic things about humanity. When we put our minds together, we can really create something new and we can change things. This is maybe aviation of the future. It's a giant airship. There's a French company that's planning to offer trips to the North Pole where it takes 2 days to fly there and back, but it's all fully sustainable. And you live in nice luxury quarters and you have a view over the sea ice. SpaceX, we see space tourism already today. So we allow us to think big. We've had some fantastic inspiration earlier today about thinking big and doing the impossible. We have quite a few examples of doing the impossible. And, well, when it comes to India, you have more brain power than pretty much anyone else in the nation. And you already shown what can be done. If we think about space travel, one of the things that really inspires me about that is the perspective that people talk about that have gone to space. When you see our planet from the outside, and when you realize that there are no borders, that the globe is just one ecosystem, that this thin blue line around the planet is the only place where we can live in the entire universe. And we start to think like astronauts, what is the life support system that we have on Earth? How do we take care of our oxygen? How do we take care of our water supplies? How do we take care of our food supplies? How do we solve conflict? If we would do it more like we do on a spaceship, I think we would fare better on our own spaceship, Earth. Now, I'm going to finish this off with an inspiring photo you might recognize. This is the lunar lander from the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO. So this is the Indian probe that landed on the moon. So you've shown what can be done. And the future belongs to those who have the courage to create it. You are the ones in lead today. In the back, we have the leaders of the future. So good luck, and thank you.